Welcome back to our city, and for the second half of the show, and talking about what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. meant to some young people here in the city of Elizabeth. I am pleased to be joined by Miss Cristina Nieves from Youth Build. Cristina, thank you for taking the time to join us.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Amir Meredith from the Sinai Christian Academy, a sophomore at a school in Linden. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, we'll start with you, Cristina. When you hear the name Martin Luther King Jr., what actually comes to mind?
Actually, freedom, peace, a man that was very heroic. When I hear his name, I actually just get happy, and I'm very thankful because he did a lot for African Americans, and he made the way to make things easier for today.
Now, when was the first time you heard about Dr. Martin Luther King? Were you a young girl? Was it talked about in your house? Were you taught it in school about him? How did you first hear about him?
Actually, my grandmother spoke a lot about Martin Luther King because of the civil rights movement. She actually always has something to say about him even now to today because she didn't get the chance to do a lot of things that we do today as far as school and working and all of that. So it really started like around the age of probably 4 or 5. And
Amir, let me ask you the same thing. You're a young guy. What are you, 15 years old?
Yes.
So what do you were born 1995, long after Dr. Martin Luther King's long been gone. And even your parents are probably extremely young. So what do you think of when you hear the name?
Me personally, I think of someone who fought for the rights of all, not just African Americans, but for everyone, so we can go to the same school, get a good education, so everybody's equal, not different.
And as I asked Cristina, when you were first taught about it or heard it, did you hear it at home? Did you hear about him in school? I mean, did you find him on a TV commercial? How did you first hear about Dr. Martin Luther King?
I was in preschool and we did a play on it, The Bus Boycott, and I actually played Dr. King in the play.
You got to play him?
Yes.
Well, how cool was that?
Very.
So did you get to memorize some of the lines or some of his teachings? Or?
Not really. I knew it then, but it's not right now.
You knew in kindergarten because you had somebody helping you, right?
Exactly.
Cristina, in an effort to obtain more knowledge about his life, I mean, have you ever done any research or newspapers or go on Google or anything to look up what Martin Luther King did more than you already know?
Yes, I did. Actually, after my grandmother came to school, so that gave me the chance to do like the Black History Month stuff. Or I had actually wrote a poem about Martin Luther King when I was younger. And I mean, every February we got to do something on him. So
tell me about. Do you know anything about the poem? Do you remember any of the lines?
Not necessarily.
See, if you said you wrote a poem when you were young, I have to ask you about it. Yeah. Well, I'd like to read it if you find it.
Oh, I could get it for you.
Okay, I'd like to read it. And Amir, in your efforts as a young guy, you did a play when you were in kindergarten, but going forward, now that you're in high school, have you done any other research on Dr. Martin Luther King?
Me personally, I haven't done any research on my own, but I have in school during like Black History Month, and yeah, it's just not on my own personal time, but I have done some in school.
See, because when I was going to school, we weren't, the only thing that we were taught about African American history was Crispus Attucks was the first African American to die in the Revolutionary War. Other than that, there was nothing in the textbooks about it, and even in the 70s and 80s, it just it didn't really start hitting textbooks till the late 80s. If you could pick one thing, Cristina, of the many accomplishments of Dr. King, what do you think is the most memorable?
I would have to say the civil rights movement.
He started.
Yeah. I think that would be one of the most memorable for me because now civil rights affect us today.
And your grandmother, or do you talk with your grandmother about this, or do you kind of just listen to grandmother about this?
No, we actually have conversations.
You have conversations, so you give your input.
Yeah, actually, I kind of inform her on civil rights, things that she didn't know or didn't know then. I kind of put her on some of that stuff.
So do you challenge grandma, or you're not allowed to do that?
No, I don't challenge her. I just listen and help a little bit. I don't challenge.
Amir, what do you think is... out of all of his accomplishments, what do you think is most memorable?
The March on Washington, because that's what he gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And a lot of people, when they think about him and when they hear about him, that's what they really think about. Was his speech.
I was on the 20th anniversary speech in 1983. I went with a group of folks that were on there. If he was alive today, what do you think? What do you think you'd want to see him work on?
If he was alive today, I think one of the things that he would want to work on would be the war, because he was a man of nonviolence, and that's all the war seems to have in it is violence. I think he would find a better way to handle the war than what is being dealt with now today.
And what do you think your friends think about? I mean, obviously you've done a little research on Dr. What do you think your friends think about Martin? Do you think they take his teachings for granted?
I think some of my friends do, because like me and my mother, we get on the bus sometimes with my friends and we sit in the back, not necessarily in the front. She says, "Oh, they fought for the right you to sit in the front or wherever you want, but you choose to sit in the back." So I think we do.
And the nonviolence is probably a big thing. I mean, not a lot of people do that. The two of you, I guess you see violence on occasion, and how do you get your message out with another nonviolence?
Well, I don't know. It is a lot of violence now today, and I think that's only because kids don't really understand like why he fought for it and what he was doing when he was fighting for it. But if they can go back into that time, I think that they would have a little bit more respect for what he did, and they would have more understanding, and there probably wouldn't be so much violence now today.
Good. As we wrap up the show, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
In 10 years, I want to be a carpenter.
Good. How about you?
I see myself owning my own business.
Good. Listen, I want to thank you two for taking the time to join us on the show and share your thoughts. We've always talked with adults about what Dr. Martin Luther King, and it was great to talk to some young people, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us on the show today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. For Christina and Amir, as well as Sierra, Sarah, and James on the first part of the show, I'm Chris Bolwage. We'll see you next week on another edition of Our City.